Hi, I'm Madeline from Unimy. You've received some emails from me. I'm the PRM brand manager here. And what we wanted to talk about today was our cultural research into the schools that appear in this year's Financial Times rankings. It's hopefully an interesting perspective for you. This is data that we at Unimy gathered from 2019. It's a really in-depth look into all kinds of cultural dynamics within business schools to do with the way that people like to learn and teach and communicate, and values and things like that. With me here is Kalin. He is the, let me get your title right, the Chief Business Officer at Advent Group. Unimy is a part of Advent Group. And he developed the cultural fit research here with his team at Unimy. He also has a background in organizational behavior. He has a PhD, I think, in industrial and organizational psychology, and at least 11 years experience in recruitment for the higher education industry. So he's really well placed to talk as an expert on this research. I'll briefly explain Unimy. We're a global graduate orientation platform using AI and cultural fit to help candidates find the best schools for them. That's probably it from me, because I think Kalin will explain the MBA Cultural Fit more and then talk you through what we found out about the high ranking schools. And there are some interesting correlations to be seen. Yeah, and the final thing, just if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat box and we will come to them as part of the presentation if there are any.
Thank you very much, Madeline, for the introduction. It's a pleasure for me to present you what we found, especially in correlation to the Financial Times rankings. So share my screen. Just to go through the presentation we have, we will send it to you as well. So as Madeline said, at Unimy, we have been working on our own sort of comparison of the top business schools in the world, which we call the MBA Cultural Fit Index. So today, what we want to present you is actually how it relates to the Financial Times rankings. Just a few words about Unimy. The MBA Cultural Fit is a key element of all our Unimy platforms. Unimy platforms are aimed at global orientation for people looking for Masters MBA. At present, we have three platforms: the global, the MBA platform, the Masters platform, and a platform specifically dedicated to French schools. We are part of Advent Group. Maybe some of you know Advent Group is also famous with the Access MBA, Access Masters, the events that we are doing. So yeah, not to touch here too much. We at Unimy, we are big supporters of what the guys at the Financial Times are doing. We are using their rankings when presenting the schools at our platforms. It's not the only way, but we are using them. I personally really like their approach, the methodology, and it also Financial Times. I don't know, we have some exchange, some people of our team went to work there, so we know them, we like them, and it's always a big sort of regular news, the new rankings coming out. So recently the 2023 rankings were published. So this is just a screenshot, just as an introduction, and as a little teaser. We were kind of not surprised, but from our point of view, seeing Colombia being number one, and IESE are our partner since the beginning. So we know them very well. We know their culture as well. It's probably one of the first samples that we gathered. So seeing them so high was kind of intriguing for us, because according to our predictions, actually these schools, and it's just a little teaser, these schools, they show sort of classical style culture, and we know this, and we also know that Usually better ranked schools are with higher scores on the opposite end of the liberal, more on the liberal style. So I'll go back to this, but this was just a very like preliminary observation that was interesting for us. So here, to go back a little, I want to explain what is the MBA Cultural Fit. In 2018, we saw that the culture has been reappearing more and more in the discourse between the candidates and the schools, like schools wanting to present their differences by trying to explain their cultures, the candidates being interested in this as well, the life inside the school. So we were quite motivated to develop a methodology to differentiate the schools, actually the school cultures, the business schools cultures. Our aim was to do something that is not ranking. So we really wanted to avoid ranking the schools in terms of best and worst. So we just wanted to do, and this is our approach, is basically mapping the school cultures, meaning that we just want to compare how they differ without saying that somebody is better or worse. And of course, this is not only the ethical, but the common sense when working with culture. We really can't say that by having a certain type of culture, you can be better than somebody else. We can say, okay, you're different. You might be better for certain candidates, but you are not better in general. This was the main thing. And we were focused here only on things that actually relate to culture. We were trying to find a way to describe the culture. We were trying to find a way to compare the cultures of the business schools. So just as a brief introduction on Unimy, okay, it's already developed. So to go forward, and then I'll go backwards again. We gather a sample from each of the schools. We have more than 130 schools here, representing 128 schools. So our candidates, when going on Unimy to find their best matches in terms of graduate schools, whether MBA or masters, they fill a quick survey of from the key questions from the survey that we give to the schools. They answer to the question how the ideal business school would look for them, and then we give them a selection of 3 schools that best fit their values or their beliefs of how the ideal business school would look like. More about the methodology and how we worked. Okay, these are some basic conceptual moments. I wouldn't spend too much time there. But of course, these are our basic assumption. We believe that the school culture is measurable. We believe that the school culture, the business school culture, or any graduate institution culture is actually measurable, and it can be described by the classical models of organizational culture. So maybe we just consider business schools as type of organization, of course, a specific type of organizations, and we try to describe their sort of organizational culture. We are using, when developing our methodology, we found out 6 dimensions that actually differentiate quite well among the schools. And they describe key sort of features of the culture that we can use to compare schools. So these 6 dimensions, most of them we took from the GLOBE study. GLOBE project was a huge project in the late 90s. In my past life, before actually working in Advent, I was working on this project as well. It's a cross-cultural project. We were trying to describe the organizational cultures and societal cultures in more than, I think, 64 countries. Now there for sure more, we have the official permission, so we adapted the dimensions for our studies. So here there is a brief overview. I will then go back on the describing the dimensions that we work with, these features that we compare the business schools on. So there are 6 for the current presentation. The ones that matter are structured versus flexible organization. So this basically describes how well the processes are predefined, whether there is some standardization, whether there is some rigor in following the same processes over how well they're explicated as well to everybody. So this would be the structured organization, and flexible organization, more organic. Things are happening more sort of naturally, not so standardized. Okay, the second one here, we don't touch too much in this presentation. The third one, personal contribution versus collective accomplishment, is something that we refer to as collectivism, individualism in the organizational sciences. And this is the position of the individual in relation to the group. So in collective accomplishment, the coaches, the members of the group, they sort of identify with the group, or they may identify, so things like they might be proud with the achievement of the group. While in the personal contribution, the individual is more like a separate entity that is, somehow not so dependent on the group they're part of. Then when we have long-term versus ad hoc orientation, and this describes whether things are well planned in advance, that delayed, there is some sort of delayed goals in the future, or we are looking for immediate sort of results, feedback, etc. Have I was thinking maybe to describe them later, but I'm doing this now. It's maybe easier, but I'll touch on them when we meet them in the results. I'm trying to be quite quick here. So Madeline, she will just interrupt me if I'm not clear or we need some other explanations.
I'll speak there, since I was going to ask you for some. Should I unmute now? I was going to ask you for some examples of exactly what this would mean for a student. However, I know we're going to talk about them in a bit more depth later. So
sure. Yeah. So for instance,
maybe especially for the ones that are really relevant.
Yeah, especially the first one. So again, a teaser. This is quite an interesting correlate to the rankings. So in the, let's say, in structured organizations, for instance, you will have a sort of a protocol of how a class would go, for instance, and this would be in relations to being more structured, to give more sort of frame for the students. For instance, you might be asked, or the professor might be asked to send preliminary an agenda of the class, to publish materials on. Usually, these structured organization coaches, they have very good software systems in where the students can look for materials. So this is also something might be typical. You are asked as a professor, okay, you just need your materials up until, let's say some harsh example, up until 3 days after the class, you're obliged to put the material, etc. And in more flexible organization, there might be different sort of individual developed by the professor protocols around the organization of the class, of the students who see, and it's not only about the class, of course, the whole life of the organization will be touched by this. Here in relation to the class, so for instance, the professor might say, okay, in my class, you're used to receive your materials, but in my class, I'll be looking for a classical approach, and you have to find your own materials, etc. So it will be different than the class of the other professor. Here on the next one, it's also interesting in terms of examples. I'll touch on some examples for the rest as well, but the formal versus informal relationship, here we were interested in the power asymmetry, authority asymmetry, especially in the relations between professors and students. So very classical example here. So you don't have this in English, but I'm Bulgarian as a I'm living in Bulgaria, I'm Bulgarian. So here we speak like in French, speak on tu and vous to people. So in a more informal relationship culture, it will be okay. Of course, as an example, it would be okay to speak on you to your professor, right? So, but this would be unthinkable. I'll tell you, in Bulgaria, this is sort of really hard. You may say to your students, okay, talk to me on you, and they will all the time go to speak to you on vous, no matter what. So here, yes, this is how, whether you're allowed to be more familiar with your professor, whether you can relate to the professor as sort of buddies, as peers, or you need to keep this authority, which also is okay. I mean, these different coaches.
So it's kind of about the codes around respect, how you show respect.
Yes, it reflects on sort of the etiquette, but it also reflects on decision making. For instance, in this sort of high power distance in which, okay, the authority is authority and you just hear the follower, the decision making will be somehow skewed. So if the professor decides that the class will go in a certain direction, you may not think of even contradicting this because, okay, he's or she's the authority. Right. So, and the last one, liberal versus classical style, more of like self-explanatory, more liberal cultures are the ones that are more open to different behaviors as being accepted, while classical style would be described by sort of unified code of conduct. So here etiquette, I'm talking about etiquette in any kind of aspect, not necessarily when professor is talking to students, which is the first dimension. Okay, not to spend more time here, because we have interesting results. Here, a brief description of what we did as a study. So, okay, this is more like the research side. We did, okay, we did it how usually it should be done. What is interesting, okay, we did the interviews, we did the pilot study. We had many dimensions in the beginning that we were testing. So in the end, we were left with 6. How we actually selected them. We had the criteria, of course, the classical psychometric criteria, validity, construct validity in this case, reliability, in terms of internal structure, etc. But we also wanted dimensions that really differentiate and they show significant difference, especially for top-ranked schools. It didn't make sense for us to include like dimensions that are well behaving in terms of psychometrics, but they don't differentiate. They don't show significant difference between the top schools, especially the top schools. So this was another criteria. Actually, we have 128 top-ranked business schools. Here I made a mistake. Right, and how we collect the data, we are looking in order to include the school in our the cultural fit, the MBA cultural fit. We need answers on our survey by at least 30 people from the school, and by people from the school we mean alumni or current students. Right, so we have this data and we have really good data. I'm really happy with the data that we have. So it gives really interesting insights, as you can see here with what we will show you in relation with the Financial Times rankings 2023. So from the Financial Times, so we have 86 out of the 100 schools. By having them, I mean, we have samples. We have a description of their culture in accordance to our research framework. Here you can see the ones that we don't have, these 16 schools. I hope soon we will have them as well. So it's you see most of the, especially of the top ones, we do have them. So pretty interesting, pretty valuable data, in my opinion. Pretty interesting. So these are 5,100 and more respondents from these 128 schools. 86 of them are from the Financial Times rankings, and the rest are not. 118 are accredited by at least one of the 3 main accreditation and by CSB quiz. Right. So, okay, here we are starting with the correlates and predictors of high rankings that we found out. Right. So here is the overview. We found out that 4 of our dimensions are actually significant predictors of having higher rankings. So they correlate with having higher rankings. The first one is flexible organization. Second one is ad hoc orientation. Third one is liberal style. And the fourth one is informal relationship. I'll go through all of them. I'll just say that when we do the predictive modeling, the regression model, these 3 are actually left in the model, and liberal style is somehow described by the rest. So just keep this in mind. The informal relationship doesn't show significant correlation, but in the model, it increases the predictability of the model. Actually, with the model, including these 3 predictors, we can explain 60. I have to check that. I just forgot. It's out of, I think, 48% of the variation, and this is big thing. So 48% of the variation in the rankings we can explain with these 3 cultural factors. I found personally this amazing. Not that because I was involved in the developing of this framework, but this is really good variation by something that is different from the things that are inside the Financial Times rankings, and these factors we can predict the rankings of the schools. Of course, if we include the previous rankings, then we can actually guess with accuracy around 90% around where the schools will be in the next ranking and whether they will be in the ranking at all. Right, so if we go by predictor, so the first one is actually the highest one. So we have this we consider as moderate to high correlation, 61 plus 61 with significance. You see, this is the chance that we are wrong is less than 0.0001 in this correlation. So here you can see how the schools from the Financial Times are ordered on our dimension, which is flexible organization versus structured organization. So here on this side, you will see all the ones that are high on flexible organization. So here you see inside with high score, Oxford, Stanford, MIT, Yale, etc. And on the other side, the ones that are high on structured organization, like you see St. Gallen, WHU, Sungwon Kwan, Mannheim, Cranfield, etc. Right. So if we look at the correlation, so here I plotted it. So here you see it's pretty clear correlation, with the only exception. So you see on the one side is flexible versus structured organization, on the other are the rankings, and you see here high in the rankings, high on flexible organization is this corner. You see there are basically no like bottom ranked schools here. So you see Stanford INSEAD here, Columbia is right here, IESE is right here. So the only chunk of sort of a cluster that is a little bit as an outlier is a full cluster, or if you can say that the full cluster is an outlier, but somehow it's not fitting in the correlation, is this one. So you see schools like BYU, Marriott in Utah, Boston, Killstrom, we see Rothman. So they're still high on structured organization, but they still you know, they still not sorry, they're high on flexible organization, but they still don't get so high rankings. On the other side, we see here that most of the schools are really on the top of the ranking. So going back to Columbia and IESE, you see both of them, they have pretty high scores on the flexible organization. So this is actually what determines from our model their position high in the rankings. This is what influences their high rankings when we create the model. So going back to the formal, the connection with the flexible organizational culture that predicts higher rankings, let's think a little bit more about this. For me, it makes, of course, this is just a hypothesis. This is just a story that might not be correct. But when thinking more about this, well, we also saw, just as an addition, we saw that flexible organization as a cultural feature differentiates schools who have rankings versus schools who don't have rankings, who are not within the top 100. Well, of course, we know correlation is no causation. It's not that if you create a flexible culture, you will climb in the rankings out. It might be, but I really doubt. I think that what happens is that schools that actually wants to make an effort, schools that usually are not ranked, they want to make an effort to, to go into better organization. This is the first thing they will think. They will think of standardizing the processes. They will think how to make the life easier for the students, how to show that they care about the students. And they usually, with these top-down decisions, they would go on this standardization and this explicit process structuring. And this might be, this might be either because they start to make the effort, and this is the first thing that they are thinking, and this may have, in my opinion, might be something that is not hard to master, that is not easy to master. It's something hard to master. You can have, in my opinion, structured organizational culture and very effective and nice school with well ranked in terms of all the things that the Financial Times is looking. But it's not an easy thing to do, because when you standardize the things that the professors are doing, you somehow, you somehow take the empowerment and you make them sort of a cog in your machine. So in the end, the student will go and see the same from every professor. They're giving them whatever, the assignments before the agendas and etc. In the end, this might be counterproductive. I believe it might be done well, but probably it's not the easiest thing to master. And probably shows rather somehow depersonalization of the professors than giving them the power to express their whole potential, to express their individuality, and to give this to the students. So just as a comment, but that's really high correlate here. I would just want to go to the liberal style culture. As I said, here, if you look, we have on the classical side, so low on the liberal style, high on the classical side, we see our schools like IES and Columbia. They're pretty classical style culture schools. And like, for instance, I can give you the example. As I said, IES is this school that is our partner since the beginning, and we had multiple conversations with them. When I was presenting our findings from their sample, they were quite happy to see this. And they were saying that they usually were coming with sort of a group to our meetings. They say, this is totally us. I mean, we might be very collective, but we are definitely a classical style school. Yes, it's Opus Dei school. They were saying, okay, in some of our classrooms you can see your icons. Of course, we will not accept anybody coming with shorts and etc. This is who we are, and we are happy with this. So here, despite in Columbia as well, I remember we did interview with one of Columbia's alumni. So this alumna, she was also an alumna of Oxford. So she did her bachelor's in University of Oxford, not the business school. And then she went to Columbia in New York, and she was saying, I was asking, okay, what did you see? How can you describe differences? And she said, no, definitely there was a difference. And definitely at first I was a little, I was puzzled why in Columbia things are happening the way that they were happening. I was not used to this, even in comparison to like sort of traditional universities, University of Oxford. She was saying, no, definitely they're more classical. The things are happening more how you see them in the films. You have this authority there. You have things being structured around an etiquette, etc. So yes, we know this about these schools. We know that the liberal classical style is a correlate, but what we see, it's not the biggest correlate. Okay, we have what we call a moderate modern correlation with high significance, of course, but it's just 0.3 correlation, still a positive correlation. And in their case, obviously, what matters is their flexible organizational culture. What matters in terms of prediction is the flexible organizational culture and also the ad hoc orientation. As for the liberal style culture, okay, you can see here how the schools on Financial Times rankings are graphed, with highest in classical style, Shanghai University of Economics, St. Gallen, Texas AM, and you can see them here. On the other side, the highest in liberal style is Berkeley, Stanford, the West Coast schools, INSEAD, and with a very high result, Dartmouth, etc. So it's its schools also really well ranked. Nevertheless, as I said, the correlation is not as big as flexible organization. With the flexible organization, you can see here the graph. To be very honest, so we see the correlation. But for instance, we have a chunk of schools here that are still sort of not in accordance with this correlation. So the correlation, the mild correlation will go something like this. These are Harvard, MIT, Chicago, both IESE, Columbia, Bocconi, still not so liberal in style, but really well ranked in the current rankings and in general. So this would be a chunk of schools that is not so clear. Of course, we have Shanghai University of Economics with a very classical style, but still a quite good ranking this year. Okay, on this side as well, but this is not so. It's not so. How should I say? Not so contradicting the correlation. And yeah, you see here very clear. Very clear cluster of Stanford, Berkeley, and INSEAD with very high liberal style and also very high in the rankings, and not only this year. And if we go to the last correlate, it's ad hoc orientation. Ad hoc orientation, this means that, okay, things are not very, we don't delay the results in, let's say, we study now and we expect results in like 5 years, or, we look for feedback, for immediate feedback. We try to be more agile in this sort of organizations, things happening with fast feedback. So here you can see how the schools are ranked, how the schools are actually rated, not ranked. The highest on ad hoc orientation is Oxford. Then we have Shanghai University, Finance and Economics, INSEAD, Columbia here, high score, IE, Cambridge, and so forth. On the other side, we have Western University of Ivy in Canada, University of Notre Dame, etc. So you see here, obviously, if you look at the rankings are not so high within the top 100, apart from Carnegie Mellon. So this actually shows, well, that obviously this cultural feature matters. Although the correlation, as I said, is just mild, and you can see it here. This is if we plot it, we see, for instance, this cluster that is higher on long-term orientation. I mean, sort of higher, but still is really well ranked. So Yale, UCLA, Duke, Berkeley, IESE, Harvard, etc. So apparently here other factors have outweighed it, especially this one. Or this one comes as an addition, or this comes as sort of an intermediate moderator or mediator factor. So with this, I have presented the main correlates that we found. And I don't know whether it makes sense what I'm explaining. In any case, I guess the participants, they can ask if something is.
Yeah, I think well, from my perspective, it's especially interesting that there is some correlation, even these mild ones, in terms of the ad hoc orientation and the long term. Do you have any, theory, hypothesis as to why that is a factor, like you did with the?
Yeah, I think it's. I'm thinking in the same direction as with the flexible organization. So usually, when we want to put an effort, I mean, I know some universities here in Bulgaria, so they definitely not ranked and etc. But okay, these are private universities. I mean, I have been part of them. These private universities, they obviously the management wants to do an effort, and since it comes from the management. Usually the management, the tools of the management are processes, strategy, goals. These are the managerial tools, right? That we can use. And usually it's something that is standardized. So at least they try to spread it on the whole organization. And as it is with, explicated processes, protocols, and etc. Same goes with the strategy and the goals. So if the university really tries, to to give better to something better to the students, you know, to compare better with the rest of the students. They will go in this direction. They will go in goals that are actually ambitious, that they're not, you know, something that we aim in the next 2 months, but it doesn't look like a big vision and etc. They will go into this. And it's probably not a bad thing. However, usually this is typical for schools that really need to make this sort of managerial effort. If you're an established institution, if you're an established university, you will be thinking of sort of the essential things. You wouldn't need to do this. You know, you don't need to really to overdo things. So I'm thinking in this sort of direction. But of course, I could. This is not a clear thing, you know. Causation. Sorry for the cliche. The correlation is not causation, you know. Like we know this. We all like David Hume, etc. So it might be something. As you know, it might be something, a third thing that influences both. It might be something that comes with the mediator, with the moderator, etc. It might be the vice versa, you know. It might be because I don't have high rankings. That's why, you know, my coach is like this, or the opposite. My coach is like this. That's why I'm not getting the rankings through some, you know, mediator factors. So we can't say, but what we can say is these are significant predictors. Despite that this is a mild correlation, it's highly significant, meaning that we can be sure that there is a connection between the two. In what direction, that's another story, and we can be more, you know, we can maybe just hypothesizing there. Right, so I want to go to some additional findings, which I also find interesting. So as I said, in our sample, we have 86 ranked Financial Times ranked schools, and we have 42 which are not. They're still quite famous schools. Sorry, like for instance, you can see them here. We have well, good university, University of Geneva, Syracuse University, University of Edinburgh, etc., etc. Good, whether locally, whether internationally, schools. However, they are not ranked in Financial Times. And here I run a non-parametric analysis on which dimensions there is a significant difference between the two samples, the not ranked and the ranked. And we found about, again, flexible organization, highly significant. So the schools that are not ranked are with more structured organization than the schools that are ranked. We found liberal style as an interesting factor. The schools that are not ranked usually are with more classical style. And then is the collective accomplishment, which I mentioned when I was introducing the dimensions. Usually the schools that are not ranked, they are more on individual contribution. So this means that here the group cohesiveness in the ranked schools is higher, which also makes sense when you look at the factors that Financial Times is using, the alumni network, etc. These are very, very important things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the, you can correct me if this is wrong or tell me if this is an example of it, but with the collective accomplishment and the personal contribution, does it also relate to how the students learn, whether they there's an emphasis on learning in teams, working in teams? This is often the way that I'm interpreting it anyway.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. These are examples, or things like, of course, the schools with culture focus on collective accomplishment. There will be all sort of clubs, groups. When they study the group study would be favored. For instance, the classes. This is quite typical. When a class is done, if a school really wants to develop the networking, usually you'll be presented with cases or with some, things to brainstorm on, and they'll be in groups. And the groups, usually the professor would prefer to switch the groups in order to everybody to work with everybody and to have this sort of connection. These are things typical for the collective accomplishment schools, and it's something that comes naturally there. And in the effect is that it's quite beneficial for the schools. The effect is that in the end, first, of course, the students are fulfilled because it's something, it's a big benefit to get from your education, the networking. Second thing, there is this group cohesiveness, these results that they'll be proud with the results of other people in their class. So not necessarily my accomplishments, but for instance, we study in the same class with you and you become after this, I don't know, CEO, or you develop some NGO that changes the way we are dealing with, you know, with the forests in Brazil, whatever. I'll be proud with this, you know, as if though I have accomplished it. I'll be proud with the accomplishment of my professors. I'll be proud with my alumni network, even if I haven't studied with them. And this would make me actually contribute to the school back. So as an alumni, I'll be proud with my school and I'll be promoting this. This is extremely powerful, to be very honest. So this is what we found. And one final, what did I? Yes, one final, yeah, this here. Something I find quite interesting is basically I checked, you know, the diversity factors on the Financial Times rankings. There are 7, I think, and I checked with which dimensions they correlate. What we found, what I found out, we found actually, of course, the team as well was helping here. So what we found was that actually schools with higher scores on international faculty, with higher ratio of international faculty, higher ratio of international board, and higher ratio of international students have lower rates on collective accomplishment culture. So here maybe is an advice. This is of course something that we can think of. You know, if you have an international class, you may have certain sort of obstacles to connect with everybody, which is unfortunate, but it's natural, right? So it's much harder for me to, you know, to connect. I'll probably connect easily with some Bulgarian, but it'll be harder for me to have the same, you know, references with you, for instance. Or I don't know, I may say something rude that for me is not rude, but for a UK person it might be extremely rude, and I wouldn't know this, etc.
Yeah, without extra politeness, yeah.
Without
Exactly.
extra, or I don't know, some politeness that in a Balkan way that I don't know, we understand in a different way. So there are these barriers. So for the schools, international, the diversity is extremely important for many reasons, not only to, you know, to give an effect to their rankings. I think this is amazing thing that we are working in this direction. But for the schools, this should be like a special attention. Like if you promote the diversity, just maybe they should pay more attention how to, you know, boost the cohesiveness, which may suffer in this. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing to be more like individually, you know, personal contribution culture. We say that this is not a good and bad thing. So for some people, this might be a good thing. But as I said, collective accomplishment, or at least some determinants of the collective accomplishment, might be extremely helpful for the school itself.
Yeah.
So in this kind of in this scenario, just this is something to maybe have in mind, and it's something interesting that we notice. These are significant correlations that we found.
Yeah, this strikes me as an interesting kind of, I wouldn't say warning, but indication for schools, because many schools understand the value of diverse cohorts and how those international groupings can learn from each other and network across different continents and countries. But it does seem to make the case for making sure that you are bringing in some specialist attention to how to then get that group really working together, if that's your aim, you know, to develop those that team ethos within your cohort.
Definitely, yeah. It's something to keep in mind. I mean, we somehow suppose that okay, we are so global recently, and we communicate with different people, but these barriers, they exist. Just that I have been watching to different television as a kid, or I don't know, going to some bands were not considered as cool as in the UK. All these things somehow they have an effect, or at least for now, people feel more natural. Okay, they see somebody from their own country, it's somehow they understand quicker each other without all these miscommunications that the cross-cultural communication can bring. Right. Yeah, so yeah, just to close my presentation, I'm quite happy with what we see from the results of our data. All these significant correlations, they make sense, and we are happy to see that such correlations exist. We know that the culture is extremely important. Not only as a cliche, we know it's something that changes heart, and it determines much more than we can imagine. Of course, we know that our framework is not exhaustive. We have 6 dimensions. That there should be more than this, many more than these dimensions that we can compare schools. But we are happy that we have found some main ones that actually make sense when we compare the schools. Again, it's we are talking about correlation. It's not, we can't say really, okay, change your culture in such way and you will achieve this and that. But we see that some things, they go together. So we can expect something from highly ranked schools. And as I said, we have data that actually can give us predictions with really high accuracy of how the Financial Times rankings will be next year.
Yes, I think that should be our next challenge, actually.
Yeah.
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 Okay, I mean, I think that's it from us, because we've taken some of your time here, and it's great that you could join us. If anyone has any further questions, you're very welcome to email me. You should all have emails from me.
Yeah, I see one question here.
Yeah, this one. What is the date? Well, this was
What is
after
the data, where
bit
it's coming
before
from?
you explained that. But
I can still say again, the data we collected either through our own network, our company network. As I said, we have been working with candidates for graduate education for 20 years. We have quite good network. Or the schools themselves, they'll send the survey to their alumni networks or classes, and we will get the data from there. Yeah, we are collecting, it's a survey, 45 questions. It's anonymous. There are some demographics, but more to check for some interesting sort of global questions rather than to identify anyone there. And yeah, this is our survey. Yeah, we actually we have been collecting since 2019, and in the beginning it wasn't so easy until we developed our approach and our framework. But then the next year, 2020, it was no 2019, let's say at the end, we actually collected quite a big sample of schools, and we are quite happy with with the sample that we have. And we are working on second version, by the way. It's we have now so much data from candidates and from schools, and I think this year we are aiming to launch a second version of the Cultural Fit, the MBA Cultural Fit.
You will have updates.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just there was a question asked, what is the data, where's it coming from? So that was just to explain that again. Yeah, you should all have emails from me, and I'm going to send each of you a press release with a summary of what Kalin has presented just now, so you'll have the key points. And if there's any other questions, or you're interested in certain aspects of the cultural fit, the data, then please let us know, because we'll be very happy to explain more or to find something specifically useful for you. I think that's it from us then. Yeah. So we'll say goodbye and thank you.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you very much.